Good morning. I'd like to call the January 18th, 2022 City Council meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Garza.
Here.
Fast.
Here.
Bagwell.
Here.
Richardson.
Here.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's prayer will be given by Pastor Daryl Peterson, and thank you, Daryl.
Thank you very much. Let's get ready to pray. Amen. Dear Heavenly, most gracious Father, for the opportunity to come before you, to come before City Council. And Father, we just lift up the City Council. But Father, first of all, we pray for a member that's been lost within the city, employee, Father God, a family. And Father, we just pray for the family. Each and every time that, Father, somebody dies within a family, Father, it's a tremendous loss. And Father, it's a void, it's hard to fill, but Father, we just lift this family members up. And Father, we pray blessings over them, and Father, give them the peace of God that passes all understanding. And Father, we just thank you for this city. We have so many things to be thankful for. But Father God, so many people just look back and they look about it on last year, how bad everything was, and they think about this year and they think how bad it's going to be. I look at this year, it's going to be the best year that the city has ever seen. We just continue to believe that. We thank you, Father God, for the wisdom and the guidance and the leadance of the City Council, the members, Father God, and in every department within this city. That, Father God, they do the best they can. And Father, that will help make this city become the best that it can be. And we thank you for these things today in Jesus' name. And they all said, Amen.
Amen. Next item, please.
Item 4A, accreditation recommendations from the Accreditation Peer Review Board.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council. Steve Beer, Hutchinson Fire Chief. Approximately 6 months ago, your fire department was awarded international accreditation. At that time, 4 individuals from throughout the United States came to Hutchinson to take a look at and really perform an audit and take a look at the inner workings of the Hutchinson Fire Department. At that time here, once we were awarded international accreditation, the peer review team gave us 18 recommendations to work on over the next 5 years before reaccreditation happens again. We wanted to wait till the new council came on board to share these recommendations with you. So some of them do have some budget impacts for the future for the fire department, and we just want to, at this time, present these 18 individual recommendations, and at the end we'll take some questions. My accreditation manager and operations chief, Doug Haanen, will present these to you.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
These will look daunting. They're pretty long, and so I've kind of broke them down to make them a little generic. So I'll just read them, and we'll go through them. Like Chief said, we'll answer questions afterwards. So the number one is work with dispatch to identify opportunities to improve and develop alarm handling benchmarks. Work with dispatch to implement an automatic station pre-alert system. Work with GIS to analyze response data across the total response area. Develop a management tool to track completion status of strategic plan and accreditation recommendations. Develop a policy on methodology and process of collecting data. Utilize data to aid in the overall program direction for public fire education. Work to fill the vacant position in community risk reduction. Formally adopt agreements with the Hutchinson Police Department and the Reno County Sheriff's Office for fire investigations. Continue to utilize annual program appraisals to develop goals and hold ourselves accountable in fire investigations. Add operational plans to protect the department's critical infrastructure. Work with local officials and Kansas Forest Service to develop local wildland urban interface fuel management to afford future development requirements and code enforcement. Expand the department's wildland risk assessment to include fuel management plan and an inspection and code enforcement plan. Develop a capital improvement plan to modify all existing fire stations for turnout gear storage outside of the apparatus bays. Formalize a process for inventory and tracking of equipment. Develop an action plan to ensure compliance with the best practices for cancer risk reduction. Develop a mentoring program to enhance career development. Work with dispatch to ensure all radio channels are recorded and monitored during responses. And number 18, work to enhance our automatic aid with external agencies. So those are our 18 recommendations that were given to us by the peer review team. And a few of these we have already completed, and we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, questions from the council?
What ones have you completed, and then what ones do you feel are going to be the hardest to complete before the
Some of
5
the ones that
years?
we've completed here are, we do have interagency agreements between the police department, written interagency agreements for fire investigation with the HPD and the sheriff's department. We completed that. We were doing it in the past. The accreditation team just wanted in writing that we had them agreements down. That one is completed. I do have in my hand here right now that the city attorney just handed me. We're working with McPherson, Newton, and Sedgwick County on automatic mutual aid agreements for help for us here in the city when we need them. We've always utilized these individuals in the past. We just never had an official working agreement between that, and so now we have that. I think that's one of the last ones here. Another one is the wildland one. Over the last 4 months, I think since August, your fire department, along with the Kansas Forestry Service, Emergency Management, Reno County, Conservation,
District.
who else was in that?
Planning, both city.
Both, yeah, city planning, county planning, Ryan. We've been meeting once a month here and looking at ways how we can better plan the city and the county as far as zoning requirements. Some of the ordinances that might have to be changed that affect this wildland interface firefighting that we deal with on a daily basis around here. And so we have a recommendation that's going to the county board. And once that's presented to the county board, we'll bring that to you to bring you up to speed on that whole proposal that we have too. As you see right now, and today we'll be burning on the north part of town here, we're doing some mitigation work as part of that whole process. I want to make one thing clear because I don't think it's out there 100%. We're trying to do the best with the media and stuff like that. But the areas that we are burning off, the right-of-ways that we're burning off right now, we're going to do about 10 to 12 miles of mitigation. We're just not going out burning wherever we think we want to burn. We had GIS take a look at 20 years of history, and they plotted out 20 years of all the big fires around Hutchinson. And history tends to repeat itself. And so we see these pinch points where the fire crosses these roads every time in certain areas. And so we strategically go in, instead of trying to fight a fire with a 30-foot blacktop road, we know in a 50-mile-an-hour wind the fire's going to come across that. We're trying to burn off both right-of-ways and give us an 80-foot anchoring point to burn off of in a defensive operation. And so we're just strategically looking at where the history has been. And that's why we're burning off certain areas and why we don't burn off others. Because we always hear that, why didn't you burn off my section or whatever? We're just burning right-of-ways off. So that's one of the recommendations here that we'll have more follow-up with you. A couple of the bigger ones that you're going to see is the cancer stuff with the stations. All our gear right now hangs inside the station by the fire trucks. Well, they want it in a separate room, like the new station that's going to be built. It has a special turnout gear room that's positive pressurized for cancer. This gear is off-gassing all the time. And so we go to a dumpster fire, car fire, whatever. We did an internal study with our retirees. 70 to 75% of my retirees have died of cancer. A firefighter at average life is 10 years younger, lives 10 years less than the average person on the general public. And it's because of cancer. We are doing everything we can. And since I've been here since 17, you'll see our guys washing down after a fire scene, scrubbing their turnout gear. They actually bag it in a garbage bag, bring it back to the station, and put it into a wash machine, and right into the shower right away because your skin's a big thing. So a couple of these recommendations revolve around reducing cancer and trying to get our retirees to have a healthy retirement. 75% is way too high. We can't prove everyone came from that, but we know a lot of them did because we were not doing best practices all these years in our line of work. So them are some of the bigger ones that you'll see. The risk management, in the risk management division, we do have I'm trying to get a civilian position to do some of this educational stuff here. That was one of the recommendations here in with our code enforcement. And the wildland part of it here, I think we started doing risk assessments out in the spyglass area. That'll be a continuing process for us here as we go forward in the recommendations here. There's some that we actually between the golf course in Lucille and 43rd and 30th Street, we did a risk assessment on every single one of them homes up in that area. And we color coded them green, yellow, and red. And we've done 4 educational assessments up there with individuals in the past few years. And we had limited success with it, but we had some great success. There's a lot of people that have done some major work up in that area to help prevent their property. And all you have to do is look around here in Colorado, what happened here a month ago. It happens all over, and it can happen right here. We're just trying to better educate our citizens around Hutchinson and on the perimeter of Hutchinson that things can happen. Last year we ran 101 wildfires. 101 wildfires we've had that just our department responded to. So that number is way too high. So any other questions?
Chief, great work, as always. I did have 2 questions. Do you feel that reaccreditation is going to be contingent upon the successful implementation of all 18 recommendations? And 2, what do you anticipate the budget implications to be overall?
I really think first part of your question here is the reaccreditation process. No, we will not complete all 18 of these individual things here. The accreditation board looks at, are you trying to make attempts to fix the problems? And I see if you're making an effort of trying to do something, trying to fix a problem that they addressed, you're going to be eligible for reaccreditation down the road here. If you just take these 18 recommendations and do absolutely nothing with them, they're going to look at you and say, no, you're not going to be worthy of being reaccredited. The accreditation process really it makes us better. We find we had 257 core competencies, I think they were, and I alluded to, and I think I told you that before. They're basically stones. You throw 257 stones on the ground. They took every stone and looked underneath that stone, whether it was Tom's division with HR, whether it was finance, budgeting for the fire department, whether it was our department, whether it was our fleet maintenance department. They looked at everything when they came to town here. And that's how really we rewarded the accreditation process, because it wasn't just the fire department, it was all of us working together for that common goal. And that's what we want to continue, is to make sure that we are reaccredited and making attempts to do some of these things. The dispatch part of it has, I think, 3 of them on here. We're working with Chief Hooper and his staff on the dispatch times here. The times we're supposed to be kicking out the door here, we're supposed to, once somebody picks up and dials 911, we should be out the door within 60 seconds as the national standard. It's taken our dispatchers about 3 minutes to get us out the door right now, and that is unacceptable. And then we are addressing that problem with them, looking at technology, looking at different things that could have budget implications. But they're not super big ticket items where we're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement that type of program here, but just to make us better and get our first responders on the scene much faster than what we're doing now. So if you're that person having chest pain or difficulty breathing or a fire, and we're waiting 3 minutes to get dispatched, that's just way too long. And then you take a response time of 4 minutes on top of that, and we're up to 7 minutes, and things just keep calculating upon itself.
Okay, so it's not necessarily added FTEs.
No, the one position we have in the fire department is really what I'd be looking for would be a civilian position, not a sworn position. I think this position down the road could definitely be that position. I think you're looking at probably a $40,000 position at a civilian position.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have to get recredit every year?
Every 5 years,
Every
sir.
5 years?
How difficult will it be to move the fire suits into a separate room? Is that what I understood?
I think the plan here, looking forward and talking with my staff on it here, what we'll be doing is looking next year's budget is get some architectural money put in the CIP and bring it around here, because 3 of our stations are almost identical, and the plans could be modified to fit that station 3, 5, and 7. And so the work on station 1 would be accomplished already, And so then we'll be looking at 4 and 6 for probably a couple different designs. But I think we got to start with the architectural work here. And we're not talking big additions here. We're talking a room 10 by 20, putting onto the outside bay of the station here.
Further comments or questions from the council? No?
You're doing a great job, Chief.
Well, thank you. It's, you know, I'm very blessed to, this guy right here, my staff, they make me look good. And it's a testament to my team and everybody that supports us. So thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Item 4B, oral communications from the audience.
This is the part of the meeting where anyone in the audience can address the council on an item that is not on the agenda. We ask that you approach the podium, state your name and zip code, and keep your comments to 5 minutes, please. Is there anyone who would like to address the council? Okay, seeing none, next item, please.
Item 5, consent agenda.
Is there a motion or questions about the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Garza,
Yes.
Faust,
Yes.
Bagwell,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho.
Yes, next item, please.
Item 6A, consider resolution authorizing redemption and payment of industrial revenue bonds.
Dominic, are you on the phone? Thank you. Angela Richard, Director of Finance. In 2008, Loan Corporation issued 2008A and 2008B industrial revenue bonds. They would like to pay off their 2008A industrial revenue bonds. As a reminder, when they issued these bonds, they're for the cost of acquiring land, construction, and equipping the corporation. The city has title and ownership of the property and leases it back to Loan Corporation. With the payoff of the 2008A, the city will authorize the redemption of the bonds. We will release the lease on the property acquired with these bonds and convey the property back to Loan Corporation. Loan Corporation plans to pay off the bonds on March 1st. Dominic Eck from Gilmore and Bell was planning on being on the phone, but I do not believe he is here for questions. I'll try to answer any questions the best I can.
Okay. Questions or comments from the council?
You said this was the 2008A bond, there's a 2008B bond,
There is, yes.
and that's still gonna be outstanding.
That will be outstanding. That's scheduled to be off, well, both were scheduled to be paid off in 2028, so they're paying off the A early.
Is there a motion on this item?
I would motion to approve the resolution of the governing body of the city of Hutchinson, Kansas, authorizing the redemption and payment of its industrial revenue bond series 2008A for Loan Corporation project and the sale and conveyance of certain property to Loan Corporation, and authorize the mayor to sign all required documents.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion from the council. Comments from the audience. Hearing none, please call the roll.
Garza,
Yes.
Faust,
Yes.
Bagwell,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho.
Yes, next item, please. Thank you, Angela.
Item 7A, consider airport steakhouse ownership change and lease.
Good morning, council. Peter Miller, airport manager. So in your packet for this week, there is a new lease for the Hutchinson Airport. I say it's a new lease. It's a new owner of the Airport Steakhouse. The lease is almost exactly the same as the lease that we had with the previous Airport Steakhouse owner. Since that terminal building was constructed in 1951, the city of Hutchinson has essentially, I don't want to say we've owned the restaurant, but we've owned the facility that the restaurant is located in, and there's been a lease agreement in place since then with whoever the current owner of the steakhouse is. And so the previous owner, Kevin Bowen, has owned and operated the Airport Steakhouse since 1991. He has hence sold that to Sean Hadari. And Sean, assuming the lease gets signed, takes over operations for the steakhouse in February 1st of this year. The only difference at all in the lease between Kevin's lease and Sean's lease is Sean asked for an additional 5-year extension. So his total lease length is up to 15 years, which is pretty standard. All the other leases we have at the airport were 15 years. Kevin asked for a 10-year lease last year, so we just added that extra 5 years onto it. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions or anything you like.
Okay,
So.
questions?
Did he have any reason why he wanted 5 more years, the new owner?
Well, he was not able to come to
Sure.
the meeting today. I've had multiple meetings with him over the last 3 or 4 months. He can't be here today. He runs other restaurants in Oklahoma, and I think he also runs the Applewood Grill in South Hutch. And so he wanted 5 more years simply because he's in it for the long haul. It may take him 10 to 15 years to get the restaurant to how he wants it. So anyway.
He anticipates a pretty high degree of reinvestment on the private side as part of his tenancy. And so he would want to be able to recapture that investment long after 5 years. He was at City Hall yesterday where we discussed it a little bit. Yeah, I think Peter and I are pretty satisfied with what he's proposing.
Okay.
Well, I'd just like to go on the record and thank Kevin Bowen for 30 years of a job well done.
Yeah, well, he's been a great tenant. It's been a great relationship between the airport and the city and Kevin. Yeah, it's been pretty good.
Further comments? I want to reiterate what you said, end of an era. What an outstanding job he's done, and congratulations to him on his retirement. I wish the best of luck to Mr. Hadari as well. Is there a motion on this item?
I'll move to approve the facility lease agreement between the City of Hutchinson and NACOM LLC for a term not to exceed 15 years and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Comments from the audience? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Garza,
Yes.
Bass,
Yes.
Bagwell,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho.
Yes, next item, please. Thank you, Peter.
Item 7B, consider Hutchinson Land Bank 2021 annual report.
Good morning, members of the council. Take this mask off. You okay with that, Linda? Much easier to speak without a mask. Ryan Vietlich, Director of Planning and Development with the city. I'm here this morning to present the 2021 Land Bank Annual Report. This is a requirement under state law. Every year the Land Bank has to publish an annual report, and as part of that we present this annual report to the council. So I'm going to first kind of give everyone kind of a refresher on what the Land Bank goals are, and then talk a little bit about what has happened in 2021, what we're proposing for 2022, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what the Land Bank has done over the last 6 years, because it's pretty phenomenal. So first up, the Land Bank goals. So the Land Bank has 5 goals. It is to strengthen and improve Hutchinson neighborhoods, to promote construction of infill housing, to reduce and eliminate blight, to operate efficiently and effectively, and to advance the economic and social interest of the city and its residents. So after kind of a quiet 2020, Land Bank actually had a very successful 2021. The Land Bank sold 2 properties, with 3 of them actually pending, with the closing happening in February. The Land Bank acquired 3 properties from the Reno County tax sale. I'm happy to say that the Land Bank was under budget in 2021. This was due to several reasons. One was less property maintenance. That's probably the highest cost of the Land Bank. That is anywhere between 50 and 70% of the Land Bank's annual budget. is that includes mowing grass, if we need to trim trees, if there's issues on the properties. The land bank certainly wants to be a good steward of these properties and not, and while the properties are under the land bank's ownership, not actually causing further issues in the neighborhood. As well as lower property acquisition costs. We usually average we budget about $2,000 a year for property acquisition. The land bank spent just under $400 at the Reno County tax sale. So we're always doing analysis with the tax sale, looking with the land bank on properties that we think will be marketable, but also that are a good return on investment for the taxpayer. And then we began work on how to better market the land bank properties. One of the exciting things that we're working on is actually looking at listing the land bank properties on the MLS, the multiple listing service, because that's how most people shop for property. So we put them on the city's website. We have signs, but this hopefully will reach a larger audience and hopefully will have a higher return on actual property purchase prices. So I'll talk a little bit about our acquisitions and sales. So, goodness gracious, that actually got a little stretched more than I wanted, so my apologies. On April 6th, the land bank did deny an application to donate property at 212 North Plum. The main reason was because of the size of the property. So the land bank usually gets properties in two ways. Either they purchase them, typically from the Reno County tax sale, or we do have property owners that will sometimes enter into an agreement with the land bank to donate a property to the city. On May 20th, the land bank sold a property at 210 East Harvey Street for the development of a future home. This is a great one. On July 7th, we actually had somebody who had lived in the neighborhood and came previously and came to the land bank and said that they wanted to kind of give back to the neighborhood. So they purchased property at 120 East Osborne Street, and their plans are to develop a future community garden. So this will be a private-run community garden, but it's something that will be a great asset to the community. Into the neighborhood. December 7th, the land bank approved the sale of 3 properties at 214, 216, and 218 West 6th. 2 new beginnings for future residential development. Closing is expected in early February of 2022. The land bank also did acquire 3 properties of the 2021 Reno County tax sale, with properties at 21 East Carpenter Street, 324 West 6th, and an unaddressed parcel on East Avenue B. So here's just pictures of the property. We always like to get kind of before and after. So this is a before property. As you can see, it's a kind of a neglected property. And so the land bank now has ownership of that, so we will maintain it. Typically in mowing season, that means the properties get mowed twice a month. And then, as I said, if there's issues with branches or trees or things like that that are impeding the sidewalk or things like that, the land bank does take care of those issues as well. So this is property at 324 West 6th Avenue. It's kind of an infill development. There's homes on either side. So the land bank saw this as a great opportunity to have some potential infill development. And then this is a property on East Avenue B. Once again, this would be an infill property. You've got 2 homes that are next to it and kind of this property in between it. So kind of looking at our strategic plans, the land bank usually does a 3-year strategic plan. It was just updated last year. We're always continually looking at it, making changes. Some of the strategies that we are looking at would be to increase online presence through social media and through partnerships with outside organizations. A couple of the organizations that we've already reached out to include the Central Kansas Veterans Coalition. Anyway, they are a group that is one of their main focuses is veteran housing, and especially the housing instability of certain veterans. So looking to see if maybe some land bank properties might be useful for some of their projects, as well as the building trades program through the high school and through Hutchinson. Once again, kind of looking at ways that we can get those properties developed and forward some of the other city issues that are priorities, including affordable housing. Coordination with city and county departments to improve land bank effectiveness. We work very closely with the building inspections department. in terms of what properties and how when properties are demolished, if they go to land bank, we work with the property owners oftentimes when maybe they're not able to take care of the property or really have no interest in it anymore. So we're making sure that at least the land bank can be a steward of those properties, as well as developing criteria for lot acquisition to increase the impact of the land bank. It's a careful dance that the land bank has to do, because obviously the more developable a property is, typically the more expensive it is, and so you have that delicate dance of how do you get those properties that really need attention, but making sure that the land bank is only holding on to them for a minimal amount of time to reduce those maintenance costs. And then encouraging more infill of land bank properties. One of the ways that we are looking at doing that is encouraging economy homes. Our ordinance was changed, our zoning ordinance was changed a couple of years ago to encourage economy homes. We don't like to use the word tiny homes because that tends to evoke an image of the homes on a chassis and all of that. This would be site-built homes, but smaller homes. And New Beginnings actually, we've been working with them on a property that they purchased about 2 years ago for a potential economy home development on 8th. And so just some different ways that we're looking, because these are typically lots that are in the older or more developed part of the city, and smaller lots that may be a little bit more difficult to develop. So the 2022 budget, so we ended the year very strong. We ended the year with a balance of just under $12,000. In the 2022 budget under the housing division of the planning department, we did request $10,000, and that was in the 2022 budget. Here's just kind of a breakdown of the expenses. As you can see, things like insurance, we have legal costs for completing sales of properties, but you can see right there the major costs there are mowing and tree service. That is about 40% of the budget there. And then I will draw your attention to the second to last item, building plans. That is another thing that we are working with the land bank on, and that is to kind of create, they wouldn't be full sets of plans, but they would be plans that so people who might be interested in purchasing land bank properties can kind of see some of the vision or some of what you can do with smaller lots, and so homes that might work on smaller lots. And so we're working to get some of those plans drawn up, and then have the ability that we could disseminate those to potential buyers. So just some ways that we're trying to kind of show the possibilities of these land bank properties. So the last bit I kind of want to talk here about, the land bank's kind of people know about it, but they don't really know of the effect of it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So since 2015, the land bank has sold 19 properties. The developed former land bank properties have increased in value by over $230,000. So most of these properties were either properties where a home was demolished, maybe there was a fire, or maybe it was a vacant piece of property. You're talking very, very low property values, oftentimes less than $1,000. So there has been several successes of where homes have been built or where city parks have been expanded that have really actually increased the value in these neighborhoods. Land bank properties have been developed into market rate housing. The Southwest Bricktown Park expansion was partially a land bank property. The land bank has partnered with Interfaith to actually build some homes, and then one of the other common ones is that oftentimes property owners will approach us and want an expansion to their side yard. So if they have a land bank property next to them, the land bank tends to discourage that because it's not meeting that infill development. While it's still great, we love for the property owners to take care of the property so the land bank doesn't have to. We certainly want to encourage that infill development. One thing the land bank is very proud of is that no former land bank property has been back on the tax sale. So it's changed hands, and people are actually at least maintaining it, paying the taxes on it, and things like that. So we're very, very pleased about that. Some of the future development proposals include economy homes, as I spoke about, with New Beginnings, private residential units, and a neighborhood community garden. So I'm going to show a little bit of before and after pictures. So this is one of the very first land bank properties that was sold in 2015. This is 300 East Avenue G. As you can see, there's a home on the site. The home was demolished. The property was donated to the land bank, and Interfaith Housing built this house, and it's now a great asset in the community. And you can kind of see over here to the right, that gray house that was built. I believe that's not owned by Interfaith, but that does show just, once again, just that kind of spark, that catalyst, if you can get some good development in a neighborhood, that it kind of further encourages it. So this is 300 West Sherman. This is before, just kind of an empty lot. Nothing really wrong with it, just kind of a generally empty lot, underutilized. And this is it now. This is the expansion of Southwest Bricktown Park. And this has been a great asset, obviously, and a great benefit to the Southwest Bricktown neighborhood. So this is 635 East Avenue, East 8th Avenue. And then here you go. This is actually was a private person, a private resident who purchased the property, built a house on the property, and is now that property is now being well maintained, and that property is back on the tax rolls. Here's another one. This is 716 West Avenue A. Before, once again, nothing necessarily wrong with the site, just kind of an underutilized piece of property. And this is a home that was actually moved to the site by Interfaith. So that has been a great success as well. So just want to kind of give the council a little bit of an idea of kind of what the land bank has done, and really some of the great successes it's had. So it's a not very well known program in the city, but it really has some huge impacts. As you can see, $230,000 of increased value on these properties for a rather minimal investment by the taxpayers. So I've looked around some of the other communities in Kansas. Kansas City has a very active land bank. They spend over $1 million a year on their land bank, and they are struggling. They usually are in the red. Wichita spends a couple $100,000. So we really do a lot. We have a huge bang for our buck for $10,000 a year. So, and that really is a credit to our land bank trustees, board of trustees. We have a great group of people who are in the development industry, or people who are passionate about redevelopment, and they have really been great leaders on this. So I really appreciate their work on all of this. So with that, I'm happy answering questions y'all may have.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions or comments from the council?
Yeah, I got a question for you. I always wondered why, like, a person, their mom dies or something like that, and they have a house, and they put it on the market for years and they can't sell it. I could almost know why. We don't buy the houses because we don't have the budget to buy houses. Is that right?
Yes, if we started, that is a goal that the land bank would like to look at some point. There are some cities around Kansas that do it. Pittsburgh's a great example. Their land bank does buy properties that have structures on it, but you're increasing your insurance costs, you're increasing your maintenance cost. It's a huge expense for the budget that land bank has currently. Something certainly that land bank wants to look into, but it would probably be tripling or quadrupling the land bank's budget at least. So.
Well, thank you, Ryan. And I did notice a few members of the Board of Trustees and wanted to thank you for your service and the success you've brought to this effort, Oscar Garcia and Dan Garber. I had a few questions about the cost of listing on the MLS. Is that nominal?
Yeah, so Josie Thompson is our chair of it, and she has been working with not only the Realtors Association here in Hutchinson, but also in Wichita. And they're working through that. It would be minimal a cost because we're typically most of these properties are being sold for less than $2,000–$2,500.
Yeah.
And so working with them to either have the agent that would be willing to forego their commission on it. And so she's been working and been a great asset on getting that through them. So hopefully that will get finalized here in the next couple of months, and we can start actually listing them on the MLS.
Okay, wonderful.
Are you putting a number to that in your advertising budget?
We are not, because the intent would be that there would be no cost to the land bank. Yeah.
And then on the donation side, if a property is donated, does the city assume responsibility for any back taxes?
Typically, no.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's like on a case-by-case situation, and we work with finance on ways, oftentimes those taxes can be either relieved or yeah, we can work with them. So it just really is on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions, or motion?
I motion to accept and approve the return to the Land Bank Board of Trustees, the recommendation of the Land Bank Board of Trustees to accept the 2021 annual report.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments from the council or discussion from the audience? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Garza,
Yes.
Fast,
Yes.
Bagwell,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Hunter, Stigler-Muller.
Yes, next item, please.
Item 7C, consider 2022 SEIU Local 513 Memorandum of Understanding.
Good morning, Council. Tom Sanders, Human Resources Director. Following our council meeting on the December 21st, the city negotiating team, along with the SEIU negotiating team, met a couple of times to try to work through our issues that were still outstanding. There were about a half a dozen or so issues that we talked about. One of them was management rights. There was one little section in there that we worked through. Work schedule and hours, which I believe, based on, and I'll preface my comments on, I've been out of town the last couple of days, so haven't had a chance to connect with ESA yet to get a full reading of their position on things. But based on his email to me over last Thursday, it sounds like that the work schedule and hours is still kind of an unresolved issue. Same with rest breaks and meal period, and then the after hours duty requirements and pay. We did talk through city designated holidays, and I think we got everything resolved there as well. The union subsequently had a vote on the 13th. I think my memo references the 14th, but unfortunately that failed. And I know Esau wanted to come up and talk to the council about some of these issues. I don't know if you're ready to do that or not, but I thought I'd just let you kind of give your guys' position, and then we could take Q&A over anything.
Tom, do you mind telling me what the vote was?
When the vote was?
No, what the vote was. Was it close? I mean,
From my understanding from Esau, it wasn't close at all. Yeah,
Okay.
So.
okay,
Yep.
thank you.
So, is it good?
To answer your question, Mrs. Mayor, it did actually get worse. Last time it was like 85%, and this time it was 95% against, based on our membership. But one of the things I took note of last time Tom was up here talking was that, you know, we weren't polling the non-members as well. And so what we actually did in this situation was we sent out a letter and told everyone about the vote, but we also encouraged non-members to come and cast a poll to let us know where they were with the whole thing. And of our membership who voted, it was 95% against. Of the non-members who cast a poll, it was 100% against. And I will say that, you know, a lot of this really has to do with the callback hours, you know, having to do with if somebody expects to work from 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, that time after 4 in the afternoon is theirs to go and watch their children's baseball game or spend time with family or do whatever they'd like to do. And we feel like it really needs to be valued and paid at that overtime rate. The big problem we have is that, you know, it has for long periods of time in our contract said that the city of Hutchinson will not flex employee schedules to avoid overtime. And that seems to be one of the main components that the city's asking for in this particular contract. Meaning if a snowstorm came, employees would be expected to come and put in a hard 12 or 15-hour day removing snow, and then at the end of the week when they have the opportunity to make overtime, this current contract language gives the employer the ability to say, well, thanks for all your hard work on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but we're just going to send you home now on Thursday and Friday. Likewise, we have employees that come in and take care of your softball fields at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we feel that that extra above and beyond work by the employees should be recognized with that overtime pay. Greg, you had a few others that you might wanna bring up, items that were.
Yeah, when I addressed the council at the 21st meeting, I misspoke when I said we didn't start till August. I did want to correct that. We did start our negotiations in June. And that's when the city presented, I think, 16 proposals for language changes in our contract. And, you know, that kind of caught us off guard. We agreed to a good majority of them, but we did have a few that hung us up. I did want to correct that. We did start back in June. It was like August before we got a proposal for wages. I did want to correct that from our previous meeting.
Thank you.
And there are many things that we appreciate. For instance, you know, as we went through the negotiating process, you guys came up on the wages some. One thing that we had proposed that we don't know that ever got back to you was that with the ARPA funds that you'll receive from the federal government, I know that there's some language in there that encourages employers to give employees a small bonus for working during COVID. And, you know, that's something that we really thought could have happened to boost employee morale, because I think most of you have noticed that your sewers and your water and things like that never backed up during COVID, and those employees came to work every day. And that's what we're really looking at, is making sure that your employee morale stays up, because the struggle is, you know, Menards is hiring people at $18 an hour in Wichita. Coleman's hiring people on at $16 an hour, you know, and those prices are going to come out here too, and it's going to be harder and harder for you guys to find dedicated employees who want to continue to come do the work of the city of Hutch. And most of the people that are here now just do it not because of the money, but because they care about the city of Hutch. So that's kind of where we are at this point. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Yes, I do. Where are we at with this? What article? I know this Article 16. Was that Article 16 you were talking about?
16.
Was it?
Here's the problem with just throwing out an article at this point is we've switched and revamped the whole contract to all of our agreement. And so what was Article 9 may now be Article 21. But I would say overall, the key is that overtime pay, making sure that when people are expected to come back after their 8-hour shift and work an additional 2 hours, that, you know, that's paid at an overtime rate, that it's not something that can just be pulled away from you, because to us that appears that, you know, the hardship that the city of Hutchinson has with finances and things is being put on the back of the employee and not the city. And, you know, they're here to serve the city, but everybody goes to their job to make money to support their family. And
So that's the article that's holding the contract up. If we can
That-
get that.
that's a big one. What was the other one, Greg, that we had talked about, the callback?
Yeah, the flexible schedule.
Yeah, it's just that, it's that flexible scheduling, taking the overtime away, and we'd be more than happy to come back and sit down and talk. We were only actually able to meet once, and one thing that Tom did, and I appreciate he and Jeff's email, was after we had already sent the vote letter out, they had an opportunity to think about it a little bit more, and they came back with further compromise. However, we had already sent out a letter that had everything laid out the way the vote was going to be, and so we said, you know, now that we've already sent this information out, we think it'll create confusion to change it once again. So we're happy to go back and talk and work these things out still.
I've heard by talking to the people that are your union, you have more people sign up on the union now.
We actually did. We had 9 new members sign up last night, or at the vote on the 13th, and you know, that's been a big problem too. I know it was mentioned that we have low membership, and you know, part of that is people want to keep their money and they don't want to pay into something all the time, but you get what you pay for. And you know, one thing that we've also complained about in this contract but have had no resolve is the fire department and the police department have 55 minutes to sit down and talk to every employee that comes in to work for the city of Hutch about joining the union. We don't have that access. We haven't had that access for the 7 years that I've been the business rep for SEIU. And you know, when we talk about wanting parity between the contracts, that's the kind of parity we expect. If we can have the same access to employees, we'll have a lot less problem trying to align our contract with the police department or the fire department, because there will be some equity in the way we're treated. And currently that's not happening.
And how many members do you have?
Well, with the extra ones, what do we have?
26.
26 now,
And you represent 120 employees?
somewhere around there. Yep.
Tom, how does this rub compare with the FOP contract and the firefighter contract?
Yeah,
With
so-
the flex time?
The flex time, the dispatch contract has exactly the same language that we proposed with the larger SEIU group. The FOP contract, it is basically silent on it, but you guys might recall that back during the kind of height of the COVID crisis that we were going through and the budget challenges, we went to flex time in the police department, sat down with the union folks, Chief Hooper, and they were totally good with it, and that's been going forward ever since. Fire department doesn't really come into play because everything is so crew-based that it's you're basically, when you're calling people back, it's for minimum staffing and that type of thing, so we really don't have a lot of flexibility there. So, need so many people on a truck, so.
So
The-
these revisions are on par with other labor groups?
Yes, as well as, and I should mention this too, as well as our non-union, non-exempt people, which we have a good number of those too. So it's not uncommon to use flex time. And one of the things that's a big challenge with our SEIU group is that you might have noticed that there's language in there that we have a 10-day notice period for schedule changes. And so, we may say, for example, have a concrete pour and we need everybody here at 7, but we can't really get them here at 7 because we didn't know it was going to happen at 7 10 days ago. And so, we would like to be able to say, oh, okay, we'll push it off till 8, and that may push us into overtime. But then at the end of the work week, if we've got everything knocked out and we're done, that, okay, you leave an hour early. And again, it's something that and we talked about this a lot with the SEIU, and I totally get their fear. I totally understand where they're coming from. But this is a cost-saving tool that we would have in our tool belt if we needed it, if we get into these crisis-type situations with budget. I don't expect that that's really going to be used a lot. And I understand that they have a healthy skepticism of that. But that's the assurances that we've given them. And I think the city's history is pretty good on this. I don't think that, there's really been any, in the areas that it is happening, I'm not aware of any abuses that have been happening at all. So we did, on the callback issue, we did, as Greg mentioned, or Issa, one of the two mentioned, we did send a proposal. I realize it probably came too late to do them much good, but what we were really focused on is kind of our core business hours, 8 to 5, when we get a lot of service requests. Most of our callback situations happen in our utility division. And when we looked at the data, most of the callback situations really fell out after 5 o'clock, but there are probably 15-20% that maybe do fall in between that. And most of the year for the SEIU folks that work in public works, which would be the bulk of the callbacks, there's a long period of time where they're done at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we've got this 2-hour gap where basically we have no coverage without going into callbacks. And so we said, okay, we'll revise the proposal and say anything after 5 kicks into callback, but anything between 3 and 5 would be regular hours, but we'll guarantee you an hour. So even if that call took you 15 minutes, we're going to pay you an hour. And that hour also goes into the actual hours work calculation for the 40 hours during that whole week. So oftentimes that will be an hour at time and a half versus a guaranteed 2 of overtime, which, again, if that 15-minute call happens, that employee currently is getting 2 hours at the overtime rate. So those are really kind of some of the thoughts behind our proposals. Everything we've proposed, there's multiple stories behind, and we're trying to address some of those ambiguities that frequently come up. Because I really think the key to having good labor relations is to have a good, well-written contract that gets rid of a lot of the ambiguities that cause conflict. So that's what we've really tried to do, even though it may not feel that way to them sometimes. But that's really what we've tried to do. So.
Does the employee got any say when he works over, if he doesn't want to go home? Does he have any say over it?
Well, the way we've written it, it gives the employer the discretion to do that flex time, whether the employee likes it or not. Right now, it's been done on if the employee volunteers, and most of the time, that's really not an issue. But we have had issues where it was a problem, and again, we've got done with the critical work that we needed to get done for the rest of the week, for that week. And we've got one employee, maybe out of a crew of 4, who really doesn't want to go home. And so that's, again, trying to address those types of situations. Plus, if we ever get into a financial crisis situation, that we have that in our tool belt as a cost control measure. So,
Well, I apparently think that the employee should have a say in it. The guy who works all day, I used to be a traffic tech. When I got called out, I know that I was getting overtime, and you get out there and work in snow and water and everything, they should have a say if they want to go home, and it should be agreeable, and that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
We should take care of our employees and give them a say what's
Yeah.
going on, so.
and Chief, I agree with you, but I think it's important to understand the distinction between a callback situation versus an employee who's working extra hours in a week that isn't getting called back, if that makes sense. So with those after hours, you're getting called in at midnight, the callback provision applies in all those situations, and that's guaranteed 2 hours of overtime, whether they hit their 40 hours or not.
Okay.
And
Thank you for
yeah.
No.
clarifying
If
that.
they
Right.
get a call back at the end of the week, if he's over 42 hours, you can still send him home on what you want to do, 2 hours early.
If it's a true callback, the way the callback's defined, it's still covered under the callback provision. If it's, hey, I'm gonna hit 42 hours this week if I don't leave early 2 hours, we'll be paying those 2 hours of overtime versus getting called back at midnight. So, hey, I had to, work over maybe 2 hours this week, instead of getting off at 3, I got off at 4, 2 days because of the workload. So I hope that makes everybody clear on that, because that's a source of confusion sometimes.
Esau, what do you think of that? Talk to me.
Sorry, guys. I appreciate Tom's perspective. But we feel like if a person comes in outside of work, whether it's 2 hours after their regular shift or at midnight, that's their personal time. And that needs to be valued at a higher rate than the time that you have scheduled as a regular work week. Everybody, what's to keep an employee from going and working at Subway as opposed to here when you guys are paying about the same amount of money? And
Well, I think
if
the
they,
benefits here would be better than Subway as far as health insurance.
You're right, but one of the benefits of having a set work schedule and overtime is another reason. And, it sometimes gets down to arguing about language about breaks, and we've got some supervisors in the city of Hutch that if the guys are going from the south side of town to the north side of town and there's a quick shop on the way and it's not the first or last hour of their break, for some reason they won't let the employees stop for a few minutes, get their stuff, take their break, and go on to the next site. That seems like it's all on the way, but yet you've got certain managers that when we put language in the contract, they want to go, oh, nope, it says 15 minutes from here to here. So if you can't make it from here to here in 15 minutes from the shop, you can't have it. And so what Tom's asking for here is a prenuptial agreement that he promises he's never going to enforce, but whenever he wants to, he can, because the legal language is the legal language. And that's the hang-up that we've got. You want us to enter into something that totally devastates our contract, our rights, and it's all based on, and I even put it into the language sent out to the employees, that the city said they're not planning on doing it this way, but they want to keep it just in case. Would you guys agree to something like that yourself for your personal employment? I don't see any person in their right mind saying, yeah, I'll give up a set schedule for you telling me to come in whenever I want and paying me whatever you want.
I have flex schedule, and during certain weeks in accounting, which would be the first week of the month, I have a 3-day closing, which would be like, let's say if there's concrete work that needs to be done, something
Sure.
immediate that needs to be done. I actually, and I'm not authorized any overtime,
Mhm.
unless it's actually authorized, I cannot get any overtime.
Mm.
So if I have to work 10 hours to get my deadline met,
Mhm.
I have to leave early on Friday.
Okay. Are you an hourly employee as well?
I'm an hourly employee.
Okay. And that was one of my other concerns. Would you compare your hourly wage for doing that flex type of work the same as these folks that are out working the street crew, or do you make a higher rate? Because that seems to be our concern with the fire department and the police department. You know, a person like me who makes a decent wage, if my employer says, hey, Esau, we need you to work Wednesday night,
Yeah.
guess what? I'm going to work Wednesday night. As a salaried employee, I make a lot more money for doing that. But these guys that are making $13, $14, $15 an hour, you're not paying them enough to commandeer their time outside of work. That's the problem here.
But they're still being guaranteed 40 hours a week work, right?
Okay,
So you're still getting a 40-hour-a-week check.
okay,
Some of these places don't even guarantee 32 hours, 38. Some of the places that you've talked about, you're not guaranteed that 40 hours. We're still guaranteeing you a 40-hour-a-week paycheck with benefits.
correct. You used to guarantee a 40-hour-a-week paycheck with benefits and overtime and compensation for coming in late. And what I'm saying is over the years, we've worked with the city of Hutchinson. Every time they said, gosh, guys, we're having some budget crisis this year. We're only going to give you 3% instead of 4%. Okay, we'll work with you. But we don't get worked with the same way. It's always a takeaway. And that was one of the things that the employees really felt like in this is, in fact, there's a quote, I can email you guys a copy on one of the things from the non-union members that they wrote in. They said this contract is all takeaways. There's nothing good in it for the employees. And we joke ourselves that Tom and Brian had too much time on their hand during COVID, and they sat around and picked through the contract and came up with everything that they could to take away things that the employees want. And, I mean, nobody feels like this is a good contract.
Well, I hate that this is being arbitrated in a council meeting because negotiations have clearly not been
Is
as
it?
amenable as we wanted them to be.
Yes, ma'am.
And Tom, I'm going to have to disagree a little bit that, you know, the key to successful labor negotiations is a rock-solid contract. The key to successful labor relations is trust
Correct.
between the city and the employees. I'd like to get some perspective on how big this flex time issue is. Are we talking about this happens once or twice a shift with people? Does this happen every other month? Are we making a mountain out of a molehill? I just need some perspective on that.
Sure. And Tom's got some data on that actually that he showed us. And your past practices show that it hasn't been done an enormous amount. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to become enormous moving forward. I know there's the promise there, but you've always had something in your contract that said if the city couldn't afford to pay, then we would go back and renegotiate. So you don't really need this in order to save yourself the money. Anytime there's a problem or an emergency, we're very amicable to say, okay, we see what you've got to do. We're not going to file a grievance because you didn't hit the 10 days because we get what you're trying to do. You want to keep the city running. And we think that as a labor organization, it's our job to make sure that the employees want to keep the city running and that they do it in a safe fashion. And I don't know if this is legal or not. Paul, you might be the person to bring it up, but is it possible for one of you council members to sit in on negotiations and hear some of the actual discussions? Because as much as I trust Tom and Jeff and everybody you've talked to, I think sometimes things get lost in translation. And I don't know that you guys get the real feeling from us. And sometimes there's some disconnect there. You know, I know we can't have all the council, but, you know, one of you actually being in the meeting might help bring some light.
I think what you said that you had, how many non-members vote said they didn't like it?
We had at least 10
All right.
that put theirs their information in. There were others that were, on their way out, but we've got some phone calls and
So
said,
we
hey,
have 85% of the people that are members voted no.
in the
right?
first one, in this one, it was 95%.
And how many did you have that were they weren't members, but you got an opinion from them?
At least 10.
At least
in,
10.
In an actual ballot that took the time to put their name and phone number on a piece of paper and write down what they thought.
So what I'm thinking, the biggest thing is you have is this flex time. If we could work this flex time out, you would, and Warren, we could probably see about getting something moving on this, or what?
I think the flex time's one of the biggest issues, don't you, Greg? I think that would move things a lot.
I think you did a good move by polling your non-union members, because a lot of I get hurt all the time, that non-members, and you polled them. I think that's a good move.
We absolutely did.
And this contract's come out. You got new members sign up on this, showing that the employees see the union. I think we ought to. My point, the employees spoke when you brought it to us. I think we ought to send this back until you can get that article figured out. That's my opinion. See, we can't take this article back and see we can't move to make it that we can make it good for everybody. Would you be willing to do that? That'd be mine.
We'd absolutely be willing to meet
All right.
and do that.
Based on what I remember, there was a willingness to come together, and we got further apart.
I don't know that we got further apart because as a negotiating team, we did try to compromise. We did discuss things. Tom and Jeff came back with some, and there was even points where Jeff was willing to go further than Tom was, and they had to caucus about that. So I think as a team, we got together. I think when the workers saw this go in the same direction and the issues they asked us to address were key issues that the city just wouldn't move on, I think that's what made it get worse. And I kind of have to thank Tom, by holding his ground on those. It actually got us 9 more union members and people being more interested in having a voice in their workplace. So thanks for the sign-ups.
Tom, can you speak to the potential financial impact that you're concerned about if we leave the flex time in? Or yeah.
Flex time's hard because, again, it's been happening voluntarily. And again, I would say it wasn't a public works situation, actually. To my knowledge, that's only really come up one time in a significant way, where we had a crew of people that all wanted to leave early. We had one that didn't, so we ended up having to, be in that situation where we're paying overtime.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now it's the supervisor's discretion.
They talk with their employees, say, hey, do you guys want to get out of here 2 hours early or not? And most of the time the answer is, yeah, we'll get out 2 hours early. In fact, it's kind of a generational shift, but it's more and more employees really want this. They would rather have the time off than the overtime. That obviously not always the case, but
I agree with
yeah,
you completely, Tom,
yeah.
in that, but it's at their discretion that they prefer.
Yeah.
So right now we're operating that way.
Yep.
You want to enshrine it in the contract just to eliminate ambiguity, and that's the rub.
Yeah, that's pretty good summary. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
He wants to take it in the contract where the supervisors have all discretion. No employee has no speak on it at all. And I think it's fair for the employee to say if he wants to go home and worked overtime, yeah, I'll go home. You might even have employees go up to the supervisor and say, hey, I worked 10 hours over, can I take off tomorrow? And they work together. It's the employee's got to say, the supervisor's got to say, it works out great. But it's got to be both sides working together. The employee has to say as much as the supervisor.
Well, I'm curious where the council is standing on this right now.
So what happens to the one person that wants to stay and the rest go? Does that one person have work to do for that remaining 2 hours?
In this
Yeah.
scenario that I've talked about
Yeah.
before, the answer was really not no. You kind of was staring at the wall for an hour. So it's not, in that case, it wasn't really meaningful work. It was.
But they could maybe do like cleaning or something like that.
Yeah. You can always find make works. We can stack
Is there a
paper
way
clips,
to
we
make
can-
the verbiage more? Because
Yeah.
I know my generation, we don't want to work overtime. We want to. If we had to work extra hours earlier in the week, we want to leave early Friday.
Yeah.
You know, so if we didn't put this language in, is that still, like, are you making it to where those people have to finish their 40 hours a week and now they no longer get to leave early? Or is there, what's gonna happen if, depending on the language, is what I'm asking. Like, are people still gonna be able to leave early if they want to and not have to stay till the remaining of
Yeah.
their shift?
Yes, they would. Yeah, I mean, if it was a purely discretionary situation, if the
Yeah.
employee wants to leave and we're good with them going,
Yeah.
which sometimes isn't the case, we need you to work that overtime. So it works both ways. But yes, if we can afford to have that employee leave early, then that can still happen. So the rub is, again, is where, when it comes to, we're done with the stuff we need to get done. There's there's 2 more hours left in the day. You've hit your 40. Do we need to have you
So
there?
it just
Yeah,
basically puts the discretion of the available overtime to the manager.
right.
So if the manager's like, we have a lot of stuff to do, I
Yeah.
know sometimes there's departments that hit mandatory overtime.
Yeah.
We have so much stuff to do, you guys need to work 42 hours
And that's
a week.
generally
You
our,
can't leave till 42
and
hours.
that's
a
generally
week.
our scenario. We
So with the-
really usually have more work than we have people, so
Yeah.
I don't see this happening a lot. Again, that's something we shared with the union, but there are those few times, or if we get into really bad financial straits, that it'd be nice to have that tool to use when needed. So, and again, we're guaranteeing that the employee works their normal work schedule, so it's 40 hours. We're not saying we're gonna cut you off at 32. We're saying, once you hit that 40, at that point, it becomes manager discretion to let you off early.
See-
That's the proposal.
Sarah, management still has all the obligation because it's called management's rights. If they
Yeah.
got work out there to do and the person wants to go home, the manager could say, hey, I need you to stay. And it's called
Yeah.
manager rights in the contract. So they still have all discretion on it. But if a person wants to stay and get 4 hours overtime and he don't want to go home, he wants to make the overtime that he earned out in the snow, out in the rain, he should have it up to say, yes, I want to stay. That's all it is. Management still has their management rights to do what they have to do to protect the city. They still have those rights. But at this point, the way I look at it, they should have a say in it. They should, if everything's going good and the people don't want to go home, they want to take the overtime, which they deserve. They got called out or worked over or whatever. Call out pay is different to me. I used to work call out pay. You have to go. That phone calls, bam, you're gone. No.
And with the call out, you're not gonna relieve them early for a call out they had earlier in the week then.
No, I mean, unless there's a safety issue because they, work crazy hours and they're too tired to really be on the road anymore or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, we would.
So this
Yeah.
automatically stems from basically somebody worked 10 hours on Tuesday and the manager sends them home 6 hours on Friday. But they want to stay to get the 2 hours that they had to work over on Tuesday.
Right.
Okay.
If I could add, like Tom said, in the park department, it's working very well, actually. Justin and his staff work very well with employees. If his construction crew has to work over earlier in the week, if it's a concrete pour or something like that, his management gets with the guys, hey, you work some overtime, and a lot of them, they'll jump at the chance. And there are employees at Public Works that will jump at a chance to get home early on Friday, especially like during the summer. They can take off, head to the lake or whatever their plans were, get that early start. So if it's at the discretion, and we counter propose this, that if it's at the discretion of the employees, we'd be all for it, because I think it's a benefit for the employees. A lot of them, gosh, I had to work, we had a main break at 2:00 on Wednesday, so they didn't get it fixed till 6, and they'd love to take off early on Friday. We'd be all for it, at the discretion of the employees. But then again, the other guy on his crew missed his kid's concert at the school because he was working that main break till 6. He feels he should be compensated, and that shouldn't just be straight time that he had to stay over and work on a main break. That he should be able to get that overtime that he stayed. And there's always work to be done. And I don't know if it's not really kept track of, but our fleet always, the guys struggle to find time to keep their trucks clean. And like during the wintertime, sometimes they'll go weeks and you get that, the salt and crud on the trucks, and it just didn't get washed off for weeks because they're so busy. And even if you had one guy on a crew that wanted to stay, hey, here's 10 trucks, and he might get 2 or 3 of them washed in a couple hours. I mean, there's always work at Public Works. There's always, cleaning and stuff to do. So he won't be sitting in the shop, doing nothing. There's always work to be done. So, but if it's at the discretion of the employee, I think it'd be a great benefit for them. I really do. And I think a lot of our membership feels that way. But it's also the guys that, had to work over and missed out on something, and then at the end of the week, they just got straight pay for that, so there was no benefit to them to work that 10 or 12-hour day fixing a main break that came in the afternoon. So we just, want it to be fair for all the employees, how they can benefit from it, so.
Just to clarify, Greg, is the language as you're proposing it, giving the employee discretion over overtime at any time or just overtime when it's required? So they wouldn't be able to add an hour to every day and then?
Oh, no. It would still
Okay.
be, and it's up to management to release them early or to, but, if they say, hey, I got some overtime, but no, if they're required to stay, that's still a management right.
So
They
if-
dictate the
Okay.
work and everything.
So if we were to accept the contract with revision of that one provision, would that be a good compromise for your members? Because what I don't want to do is go back to negotiations and drag this on for another 3 or 4 months and not get people their raises, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think you have a good point with that, with, getting everybody their raises and moving forward. But factually, because it's a merit raise, you're only gonna have a few people affected in January. However, we would really like to tidy this up, move on, and get things going. So if you guys were able to make that at the employee's discretion, I think that would do it. The only other one that we've really heard a lot about is that break thing. And if you could even talk to managers and ask them to be reasonable about when people take breaks, we would appreciate that a lot, because you can imagine going out and working in a cold ditch someplace and be told that you can't go to Quick Trip or you can't get a hot chocolate or something like that. You have to have the cold lunch meat sandwich you brought and never leave the job site. That's not a positive work environment, and you wouldn't want to go to that. I wouldn't want to go to that, and so I'd ask that we not subject the rest of the employees to that.
I'm really disappointed to hear that that's occurring if it is.
Yes, ma'am.
So I appreciate that
Thank you.
insight.
Is there a way to modify the language for the flex schedule in a way where we can still have the flex schedule, but if it's a mandatory emergency 2-hour stay, they would get the overtime on those 2 hours?
We could try it.
Like a compromise between you
Yep.
two's languages?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate? I think what I'm hearing you say is that if the employee is made to stay on Tuesday.
Because of an emergency type thing, like
Right.
not on their own free volition, like
Correct,
they
correct.
decided to help out or do, it's like an
Sure.
emergency situation.
Uh,
Then they would be guaranteed for the emergency situation overtime.
For that Tuesday?
Yeah.
You mean like you'd pay them the 2 hours of overtime Tuesday night, and then they'd have that even if they only got to 38 hours? Or because we always
No,
encourage.
they would, if, once they hit their 40,
Yeah.
they would still be guaranteed their 2 hours on Friday.
You mean the 2 hours that would turn into overtime?
Yeah.
Okay, so they'd actually have 42 hours. Am
Yeah,
I-
they'd have 42 hours,
Yeah.
but it would only be implemented if it was an emergency situation. So not if they decided because they're a good worker and they're staying and they're working 10 hours on Tuesday to build a bunch of trucks and they're getting off on early on Friday.
Right.
It's an emergency situation that causes the overtime. It would be guaranteed.
That would be something that I would be more inclined to take back to the employees and not just say yes to immediately. I want you to know that anytime there's an emergency, anytime there's snow
Yeah.
removal, we absolutely encourage that they go to work.
Yeah.
Okay, we want them to show up at those things. It is a necessity that they show up at those things. It's just the whole discretion at the end of the week. So
Yeah.
if
I'm just
they-
saying that it's a kind of a compromising language.
It is, and their language is fine. in the contract already if it just says at the employee's discretion. That's all that needs to be added to that article to make it acceptable to us.
If you say at the employee's discretion, what if we need you to stay till the end of your shift on Friday, but then,
Right.
nope, I want my flex Saturday, I'm leaving.
That's
early.
already understood. There's
Okay.
contractual language
All right.
that says in the matter of an emergency, you under management rights have the right to tell them, no, you're staying 2 hours. We need you. This is an emergency. We 100% stand behind that. So does the employee
But
group.
if
I mean, they
it's-
know that.
If it's the employee's discretion, though, let's say they decided, I'm gonna do this extra work Tuesday, I'm work 9 hours. But no, you need to get, I just want to make sure that there isn't an abuse on the employee's side too, or abuse on the
No,
manager's
absolutely
side.
not. And if they
I
did that,
think there needs to be some form of language and compromise.
totally willing to work that out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that should be our next step personally.
Because when I get a phone call from them saying, I don't want to work overtime, it's an emergency, I'm going to say, well, too bad. Go work the emergency and we'll talk
Yeah.
about it later. So, I mean,
So,
It's
I
al-
feel like that's a good compromise and
It's
bring
already
it back
there.
to the,
It's called management rights.
yeah.
If your supervisor don't want you to go home, he says you can't go.
Well, I think what we need to decide here is whether or not we're interested in approving or denying. So are there further questions or comments or a motion with direction to go back or to accept?
I hate to do this, but motion to go back one more time.
I think we need to go back and work this language out on this one article, and that way we get this worked out and get this moved on. And I think, in my opinion, your employees are very important. Make them feel important. So, and you already got the answer. They went and did a poll, said they didn't like it. Neither did the paying dues members. They talked to you, they told you that. So I would suggest they go back and try to work this language out.
All right, so I motion that we go back to work the language out on the article regarding flex time. Do I get a second?
I second that.
Okay, we have a
If I
motion
could ask
and
one question before you
Sure.
vote, is that the only article we're gonna be focusing on, or is there anything else? Because,
That's critical.
Yeah. So,
I think the union just said that that's the only article, am I right?
well, they're concerned about the breaks.
The what?
The breaks.
Okay.
Like a little bit of flexibility and employee
Well, see what we
discretion on
can do about
breaks.
the breaks if we can, you know? But I think what I'm hearing from you guys is the motion is the overtime part of it. Am I right or wrong?
correct.
Alright.
That is the biggest issue.
Okay. Go ahead and
Alright,
talk
so-
about the breaks, say where you come from, but the biggest one is the overtime.
Well, we'll agree to just talk about the one issue. It appears that by letting you know about what's happening on with the breaks, maybe that's something that you can give a directive. to
For
the city
sure.
manager.
I think the
We'll
city
be good
manager
with
can
that.
handle
Okay.
that.
Esau, glad you said that.
All right.
It gives me opportunity to ask for about 2 minutes, Mayor. We continuously get flogged with the issue of breaks, and I know that we have some disparity amongst supervision as to how those are administered. Have I seen any egregious reversals that have come through my office where I've had to correct that? Not egregious, but I think I have probably revectored one of them in how they were reviewed. But the problem is, and it's maybe not a problem, the employees wish to have a workday that ends at 3 o'clock. And part of that, their request to us is that we're gonna do that, but we're gonna skip our lunch. We don't want lunch. Come on, guys, everyone's gotta eat lunch, even a fat kid like me, I gotta eat lunch. So the problem then becomes, we still eat lunch. And we'd be reckless, I think, to require strenuous activities like we do without food and water, that's not what we do. But the reality is, they've negotiated in daily practice for no lunches so that we can bring the trucks in at 2:30, 2:45 in the afternoon and kill the workday. They put their hours in, but they're still gonna have meals, they're still gonna eat. And where it's been a rub in the past is somebody leaving a job site where they were already mobilized, stationed. I think most of them that I've seen relate to that specific issue, where someone's leaving, they're taking a truck and a trailer to go drive to the south end of town, might be multiple miles away. That's part of the issue. What I don't want to do is to say, let's get rid of all this ambiguity and say everyone start at 8 and leave at 5. Here's your guaranteed lunch. Want a break? Fine, you got it. We don't want to be that inflexible. We want people to be able to bail out 3 o'clock on a Friday, if that's part of the quality of life and the very essence of the position and the work that people want to pursue. Now, I don't think they're going to get that at Menards. I don't think they're going to get that at some of the other places paying $19, $20 an hour. The flexibility certainly is not there in those other arrangements. I do appreciate the market implication, because that is real. But what we don't want to do is get flogged with this repeatedly publicly and say we're not dealing in good faith, when in fact the evidence shows that we are dealing in good faith and we're offering flexibility beyond what a lot of other organizations provide. So that's probably a truer glimpse of the issue.
Okay,
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for offering that.
There's been a motion and a second.
Okay, is there further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Garza,
Yes.
Fast,
Yes.
Bagwell,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Torres Carvalho.
Yes, and I did just want to add that, I hope this signals to our staff how much we care about coming to terms with your needs. And I know it's a very difficult, often thankless job, especially in the winter, and we really do appreciate our crews. So looking forward to coming to an MOU that is more amenable to both parties. Next item, please.
Item 8, report of city officials.
Okay, let's start with you, Sarah.
Yes, okay, I actually have some information here. This is a resolution that I'd like the city council to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Got it.
I just gave out a resolution of the Hutchinson City Council declaring the city of Hutchinson to be a constitutional republic. I believe that there is a lot of things that have come in recent years through the pandemic, and I would like to reinstate that, people have inalienable rights, people have individual liberty, and that we sworn an oath of office to the Constitution and to uphold the Kansas Constitution and the Constitution of the United States of America. So I would like for further review if we could consider having a resolution to be resolved by the city of Hutchinson City Council that any executive orders issued by the state of Kansas or by the United States federal government that are overreaching or clearly violate our constitutional protected rights that we will not enforce in the city of Hutchinson, Kansas against its citizens.
Thoughts on a possible secession?
Can you give me an example where this has happened and you think it?
Example of when this has happened?
Yeah, when.
Well, state mandates for, like mask mandates, vaccine mandates that are coming down. We've had several mandates, executive orders from the current administration. And just that we are here to stand with the citizens and their individual liberties as we were sworn into office. So it is a resolution to stand by our citizens that we have taken our oath of office and that we're here to protect our inalienable rights.
So are we looking at sidestepping the process of state representation to push our views at the state level rather than taking the, or are we saying if no matter what you do at the state level, we're going to declare ourselves independent if we don't like the outcomes?
If we decide that the state is doing something that's unconstitutional, we will not enforce it in the city of Hutchinson.
Similar to the Confederacy, just a secession. We would be our own.
I get it. I understand we're trying to be proactive on concerns.
I'll
it's-
read the whole thing.
I get it. It's a slippery slope because then it's, well, we don't like this either, so we're going to declare ourselves independent of this rule. And independent of that rule.
It says, whereas the Constitution of the United States protects our rights endowed by our Creator, as well as guarantees liberties to the American citizens, including the establishment of justice, the promotion of general welfare, and securing the blessings of liberty. And whereas the Constitution espouses many principles onto which the United States is founded, namely the separation of powers, individual rights, and the rule of law. And whereas the Constitution of the State of Kansas provides that all people by nature are free and independent and have inalienable rights, including enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining safety, happiness, and privacy. Whereas John Adams, the second president of the United States, once wrote to his wife, but a constitution of government once changed from freedom can never be restored. Liberty once lost is lost forever. Whereas the City Council of Hutchinson, Kansas recognized the importance to stand with liberty and individual rights to uphold the Constitution that was sworn when taken office. And whereas the members of the City Council of City of Hutchinson believe in the separation of powers, individual rights, and the rule of law as outlined in the United States Constitution, including the freedom for local government to have local control over issues related to its citizens who reside within the city's jurisdiction boundaries. Now therefore, it be hereby resolved, the Hutchinson City Council, that the City of Hutchinson is declared a constitutional republic city. By it further resolved by the Hutchinson City Council that any executive orders issued by the state of Kansas or the United States federal government that are overreaching or clearly violate our constitutional protected rights that will not be enforced by the City of Hutchinson against its citizens.
Sarah, I appreciate your concern and your allegiance to our constitutional rights. I think my biggest concern is that this would be an action of treason against the Constitution to which we pledged an oath. Just from a legal standpoint.
Why would it be that?
Well, because you're basically saying that you no longer.
I'm not saying we're upholding the Constitution. That's all it says. It says we can't just say whatever we want. It doesn't say that. It has to be within the Constitution and legally within the Constitution of a protection. So if it can't be arbitrary in any way. It has to be if there is a mandate or an executive order by the president that goes against what's written in the Constitution, we will not enforce it on our people. That's what it clearly says. We can't just arbitrarily make up our own rules outside of the Constitution.
I do think the courts offer an avenue, I mean, if we went by our Constitution, to address concerns we have with infringement on our freedoms. But Paul, as an attorney, I think you could speak better to this than I ever could.
Well, off the cuff, since that's how we got it. Understand what we are. We're a municipal corporation. How were we established as a municipal corporation? By the state of Kansas, by state law. We couldn't exist without it. And our authority, all of it, for a municipality comes from the state of Kansas. And we can't act without that. There are certain things that the state of Kansas prohibits us from doing. And then we also have home rule to address issues that are not addressed by the state of Kansas. But to be a constitutional republic city, well, actually we're a municipal corporation established by the state of Kansas. And yes, we do have recourse in the courts for anything that we would deem to be unconstitutional. We can challenge it in a courtroom. But to simply say, carte blanche, well, we think it's unconstitutional, we're just not going to do it. Your city attorney humbly says, don't do that, counsel. And this isn't something that should be decided today.
I understand that the mandates have been hugely unpopular, and many of them have been struck down by the courts. So I have a lot of faith in our separation of powers in the different branches to alleviate concerns that come up. But do appreciate you bringing this to our attention. And does anybody have other thoughts or want to move an action on putting this on the agenda?
Can we get a record of vote for bringing it to the agenda?
Sure.
Um,
Would you mind calling roll, Linda?
Roll.
Okay.
Garza,
No.
Fast,
No.
Bagwell,
Yes.
Richardson,
No.
Tyros de Carbello.
No. Did you have other items that you wanted to discuss?
I still,
Please do.
okay. I would also like to see if we could bring a matter to direct the city staff to look at reorganizing the stormwater utility fee for the Hutchinson of Kansas. I would like to be, that we direct the staff to come up with something for us at a future agenda on how we can reduce that to become more competitive without eliminating it, but possible restructures plan and what that impact would be on our budget. And I would like that on a future city council agenda to discuss and have staff give us some options.
Okay, thoughts from the council on a revision of stormwater utility fees or a larger conversation?
I would wholly agree with that, Sarah, thank you. I think that most people can afford $4.25 on their home water bill. I think that some of the way it's structured for business is a lot of money for folks. And I know we're doing things with that stormwater utility fee. It's getting used, but it, you know, the main project we're working on is going very slowly. I'm not sure that we need to continue to fund that fund at the current rate we're doing it. I would support that, and I would, you know, we need to know what the budget impacts are.
Yeah.
This isn't just, hey, we want to get rid of that. We maybe need to be a little more thoughtful about it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Cantrell, do you think that we could get some ideas between Mr. Peterson, engineering, and Mr. Vietlock, and possibly Izzy, in regards to planning and zoning requirements that affect the stormwater impact on certain properties?
Sure.
And possibly working into a deduction or a benefit to properties that have to do some of those planning and zoning updates that have a positive impact on stormwater, knowing that there could be an overlay district in the future. Some of the pushback on making those changes may be softened if they know they're going to get a stormwater deduction on their fees.
I think that could be modeled. I think we have a couple areas where we could probably demonstrate it, especially with some of the Cow Creek modeling stuff. The subject that's being contemplated right now, I don't think we can cover all this in just a regular council meeting agenda item. I think it's a work session. There's a lot of history to it that really, in all fairness, you all should be aware of. It took me a long time to figure out a lot of the history of it, but I think it'd be a work session if that's what you guys want to do.
Yes, can we direct staff to start looking at the different options so when we go to that work session, we don't just hear about the history, but I would like different options to also be ready and discussed in the work session. I don't want to just know about why you're doing it and the history. I also want at least two options of how we can restructure it and what that budgetary would be, what the budgetary impact would be. Because I want historical information and possible future information. And I believe we could probably, how long would staff need before we could have a work session that involves both those, not just the history, but also potential changes and what that would look like?
I'd ask that you give us at least 30 days to put that together.
Okay.
Yeah. And what I don't know is if the governing body's asking for maybe a nuclear option as far as take it away completely, reduce it by 50%. It would be helpful for us to know that going in.
I think it'd be amenable to have a program where it logically makes sense. I know we have some implications in regards to new development if they were to hold stormwater runoff on site versus letting it get into the stormwater system. I'd also be curious what properties in town are not paying stormwater fees but are contributing to an issue with the stormwater system. If they're currently not paying city water bills, so they're not doing the water fee. I'd be curious what properties are doing that. But if we could, I think it would be beneficial to at least vet the idea of the landscaping, planning and zoning requirements that would affect stormwater in a positive manner and give discounts to people, commercial properties that enact those changes. Because it only makes sense because they're helping the stormwater system.
Yeah, understood.
So I think it's twofold, of a fee restructure and then also future development type incentives.
And I'd be interested in understanding how any changes would impact the drainage project near G, south of G, that we're working on, near Elmdale.
Okay.
Because that's got to get done. We've got to get that done.
Let's start with an initial work session, see where it goes, and maybe we can kind of turn this into a Cow Creek ongoing discussion. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be, I mean, I'd like for it to be eliminated, but I don't think it's possible for it to be eliminated. So we are not going for the nuclear option, if that helps clarify. We're going for, like you said, possible incentives and restructuring so that we're maybe taking in a little bit less than the $2 million a year, and making it really, the way that it's structured, making it really hard for those people having to pay very large bills every month for the larger businesses and whatnot. So I think that's the direction, seeing how creative you guys can maybe get and get back to us on how that can be restructured so that we're not taking in the 2.2 million. Maybe it's 1.4 million instead.
We'll do our best.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items, Sarah?
Yes. I was wondering if we also could have a discussion on the 1% for art ordinance that we have for projects.
Well, it sounds like we're throwing a lot of things out right
Yeah.
now, and this shows that we all have different priorities, and I
Mhm.
think we need to have some kind of governing body retreat, 3 or 4 hours, so we can work through some of the items that are of priority to us and map out a session schedule, special session schedule.
I was
to-
just wanting a public consensus or public vote of consensus of who up here is willing to talk about those things and if we can get it on future agendas.
I actually had it on my list to bring up the public art 1%.
Yeah, 1%.
And see what everyone's appetite would be on making some adjustments to that.
Others who are interested in having the public art item on an agenda?
I'm certainly willing to discuss that. It's a concern on very large projects.
Okay.
And that'll be it for me today.
Okay. What do you have, John?
Well, I was going to see what the appetite was for adjusting the 1% public art deal, but that was stolen.
Oh.
No, and yeah, I've had some thoughts on that in regards to being more fiscally responsible, but then also freeing up some more independence for the Public Art Council to choose where and how they apply our art investments. That was really the one thing I was going to hit on, so I'll pass from there.
Okay, thank you. Great.
A couple things. I heard from somebody that is moving out of town. They wanted to rent a pod to move with, and then the company comes and takes the pod. Apparently, we need a permit for that.
Seriously?
This is very frustrating to me. It doesn't seem like common sense. When we can go rent a U-Haul truck, we don't need a permit. All we need is a credit card.
Ooh.
Maybe I should stop.
Yes, I believe the permit is if it's on street side, right? So you don't need a permit if it's parked in the driveway, but you need a permit if it's on the street.
that wasn't
Or is
what's
it completely here? Because I know other cities, if the pod is parked on the property in the driveway, you do not need a permit. It's only if you need a
I think we're
street
familiar with
side
this one. There may be a
permit.
backstory on this one.
Yep.
Makes it unique.
Yeah, so I can give a little bit of background on kind of what we require. We do require a temporary use permit for pods, and the reason for that is because of monitoring the time length of it. So our ordinance allows for 7 days, and then I can give a maximum of an additional 7 days. So for 14 days. We do not allow them on the street. They do have to be placed on the property. Perfect example, we had an issue over the Christmas holiday of one that was placed on 17th, right in the traffic lanes, and it was actually a traffic issue. And so
That's the one I'm thinking of.
yeah,
I
yeah.
wonder if that might be.
And so
one.
we do require the permit. We certainly could look at. We do have other temporary uses that we. There's still standards, but we don't require a permit for. We certainly could look at that. But I will say we do get calls and complaints from neighbors of people who, have the pods that are sitting out there for much longer than even our ordinance allows. It's not a common issue, but we do get quite a few calls about it. So,
Well, Ryan, I know this was discussed 3 months ago. It's probably 6 months ago now. And I'm not talking about somebody wanting to build a house out of pods or making a shed out of a pod. I'm talking about somebody makes a phone call to a company out of town and they're like, oh, you're from Hutch. You need a permit. And these are the kinds of things that really bother me. I understand, and maybe this could be more of a complaint-driven type enforcement. I want to do things that make sense. I don't want to gut the city code or anything like that. It just seems like if we want a dumpster, I don't have to call anybody up. I get a dumpster if I want. And I don't know, John, you mentioned, people, we're looking at trying to make some adjustments to the code. At least we've talked previously about it. Is there a way to, I know that, and every time I hear a complaint, I'm not going to come to you and say, hey, here's the next thing we need to do. But I wish there was some way to really manage this better.
Can I?
I just read a study from George Mason University that talks about overregulation and about how much it slows our growth.
I agree.
So anyway, that's all I have. Sarah, go.
Thank you. Couldn't you just change the ordinance instead of needing a permit that if a pod is over 30 days? And then it would be complaint based, so we wouldn't have to have a permit on each one,
Complaint
but
based.
we'd have some kind of ordinance for time length. And if it's over 30 days, it's considered permanent at that point, and then would need a permit, and then we could deal with it on a complaint base. Wouldn't that be a compromise to still having it so we don't have pods hanging around all town, but we're not permitting every person that needs to use it?
We have several items under our temporary use section that do not require permits. We could easily just make this one of those.
Okay.
Still have the location limitations. Still have the time limitations. So somebody's not parking on the street. So somebody's not parking it in their driveway for 2 months and causing an eyesore in the neighborhood, or blocking their driveway so then they have to park out on the street. We certainly can do that. I will say, and one of the things I've done since I've been honored to take the position of director, is I have looked at the ordinance with a very critical eye of ways that we can eliminate some of these kind of barriers, and that is certainly something we can take to the Planning Commission. What I do typically is twice a year, because there is some expense to the city of every time we do an ordinance, we have to post it, and that gets rather expensive. So twice a year, staff's always looking at the ordinance, taking comments from the governing body, taking comments from the citizens, and we take it to the Planning Commission and we bring it to City Council usually twice a year of a package of ordinances. And so that's something we certainly can look at and have the Planning Commission take a look at and bring it to you all the next time that we bring a package of ordinances to y'all.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that, Ryan.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Next thing, I think we all got the email about a blood drive, January 25th, 6th and 7th. That's near and dear to my heart. I have it scheduled on my schedule, so. That's all I have.
unfortunately can't do the blood drive yet because I just donated blood, so I'm not up to be able to donate again until February 10th. So otherwise I would go, but the Red Cross says I can't yet.
Anything else, Greg?
I think that's enough.
Okay, what about you, Steve?
Guess suddenly got a cough. I don't know where it comes from. But all right. I like to tell on the stormwater thing. Kind of a 2.5 year council member, but I did work for the city. There's a lot of components in that stormwater thing. There's trucks, there's manpower that is fueled by that stormwater thing. So you're going to affect a lot of things. So I'm not going to say it can't be done, but there's a lot of components to that stormwater. So we have to make sure we handle it good, that we still can do what we have to do with the stormwater fund. And I know Mr. Bryan's here. He am I right? There's some components to that. Come on, if you would, sir.
Good morning, Brian Clinton, Director of Public Works. Steve, what was your question?
No, there's a lot of components of the fund. Doesn't it trucks and stuff involved in that, construction crew that's involved in that money from the stormwater. Am I
That's right. Yeah, there's a portion of it that funds the operation and maintenance of the storm sewer system. We've got about 100 miles of storm sewer pipe that's buried. The majority of it's over 50 years old, so it needs quite a bit of maintenance and repair. So we've got a 2-man construction crew, and then we've got 2 people that go out and clean the storm sewer on a regular basis as well. So we've got a 4-person crew.
So historically, we would take in about $600,000 a year, which maintained that portion of the maintenance, but we did fall behind. So even at 1.4 million or 1.5 million, it would still be an increase to try to catch up on some of that. Because historically, before the stormwater utility fee, it was $600,000 in maintenance costs to that stormwater utility fee. So, Steve, I am saying I understand, and I'm not saying we bring it back to the 600,000 that was before, because that's how we got into this situation. But I just think we need to roll it back a little bit, so we still give, like I said, the 1.4 is even double than what we used to budget for that. But, going from 600,000 to 2.2 million, I think it's a little bit too hefty of a mode, especially when we're trying to rebuild our economy, and it's directly impacting a lot of the bigger places that want to come in that have the larger parking lots and the larger roof space. Even the state fair was upset with their bill, and then we ended up having to renegotiate, some of our sales tax to keep them here, and it started a whole thing because of how tremendous, that was. And so that's all I'm saying, Steve. I understand that there's bills that need to be paid. There's maintenance that needs to be done. I'm not saying we strip it back down to the $600,000 a year, but I think we need to reduce it from the 2.2 million.
Yeah, and I do have a little bit of history. I'm not super prepared. It's been a little while since we did this, but we did develop a stormwater advisory committee as we were going about and looking at our stormwater system. And so through that process, and that stormwater advisory committee had a member from the State Fair on it, had a member from Walmart, from Lowe's, DCI. So, there were a lot of businesses included on that stormwater advisory committee. And really what we looked at was what level of service do we want as a group to provide to our stormwater. Do we want, as far as improvements go, we had a stormwater master plan, and we hadn't done any improvements to that stormwater master plan for 10 years. And so, those were the questions that we asked. Do we want to be able to fund some stormwater improvement, flood reduction projects? Do we want to be able to develop a crew that is specifically to maintain the stormwater system? So again, not prepared to really fully address this, but we will definitely put something together and work with the city manager on providing some information to you. And like every utility, we do need to reevaluate what those rates are, what we want to accomplish with that money. So it's probably a good time to look at what that rate should be and what we can accomplish with those funds.
Thank you, Brian.
Anything else, Steve?
Yes, I went yesterday to the Martin Luther King celebration. I didn't make it Sunday, but they did a very good job of it. I was really impressed. I know you were there, and it was a really good thing. I was really impressed about it. So next year, is hopefully we can get everybody out to it. It was a real fun thing.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I had just a few items. One, what you mentioned, the blood drive, that is taking place Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at First Presbyterian Church. The hours vary from 11 to 6, 12 to 7, and 7 to 1 each day. You can sign up at redcrossblood.org and select an appointment time, so you don't have to wait as long. There is a national blood shortage, so hoping people can get out to that. Thursday is our first study session at 6:30 p.m. I have received a few questions on whether or not we've figured out if we'll be able to stream it. Will it take place in here or there? So
I think the answer still is out there. We don't know for sure. At the very least, it will be recorded, live streamed. I'm not as certain.
oh, okay.
We
Okay.
have the little owl, the little thing that goes around and records us as we talk. We can put that on the table. It's kinda-
Okay.
Kind of a freaky little device.
Okay.
It's pretty eerie, really.
And then
Um,
would that be added to our YouTube channel then?
Yeah,
Would it be
that's my
uploaded?
understanding.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate the staff working on that. The other few items I had, do we have an update on the convention center and where that development project stands?
The atrium.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Trying
Make
not
sure
to
we're
say
on
it
the
that
right-
way.
We
I
should
wanna
only do one of
reference
these at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're waiting for the final piece, the asbestos piece of the environmental to come back in. That was performed last week. Wouldn't surprise me if I had that on my desk sometime this week.
Okay,
I believe that's the last of the environmental that has to be done. Hopefully it is. That means we bring back a purchase contract and we would ink it with the formal approval of the governing body.
okay. So we have somebody interested in purchasing? Or are you talking about us?
Us,
First, okay.
if there still is that level of interest. It'll come to a formal question.
Okay. Thank you for that update. And then the last item I had was a potential board retreat. And my reasoning behind this is that I feel like we all have different priorities, and every meeting they're gonna come out and we're gonna throw them at staff, and it might be beneficial for planning purposes on behalf of the staff's time if they have the opportunity to hear what the priorities are for the year, and then instead of just maybe every other week, a new curveball that maybe disrupts their own schedule. I didn't know what your thoughts were on that, or when we could get something like that scheduled in between other study sessions.
I think what's helpful to staff is knowing what the ultimate decision is of the governing body, as far as consensus as to where the governing body wants us to go in its
Yeah.
formal capacity. It may not do us a lot of good to know what the individual concerns are of each individual on the governing body, because we can't legally do anything with that.
Well, consensus could be gained in a meeting instead of maybe just informally during council comments each. Like we had 2 items of consensus to consider in the future, just at this meeting. We may have 2 more at the next meeting. Do you think it would be beneficial, because I do, for us all to get our suggestions on the table and present those to staff, the ones we have consensus on, at one time instead of every other week?
I've seen
I
this
think
done
that was
several
the
ways at different
Point of the
cities.
study session I brought up last time. was for us-
That we still haven't scheduled.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way a lot of cities deal with this is when an idea is thrown up, you almost have to vet it at that specific time. I guess you don't have to, but a lot of cities opt to have that discussion right on the spot and call for the question, do you all wish for this to advance to the next agenda? Is it that important to you all? And so a lot of places have had to go to that procedure. And that's kind of a pain, but it really lets everyone know what the level of importance and interest is. Otherwise, we're kind of spinning our wheels because we don't know where the group wants to go as a unit. I serve at the pleasure of the governing body, so of course I'm going to go to retreats if you guys say we need to go to retreats. But as far as us knowing and where to put our resources so that we can achieve the goals and objectives of the governing body, that's typically done maybe once or twice a year, normally around budget time. That's how everyone does it. I have noticed since I've arrived here that there probably is more disparity amongst the philosophical beliefs of the individuals on the governing body. That's a great thing. That's democracy at work. But in order to forge a direction, I don't think we're always going to have a unanimous vote. And it may be where we have to have a special process just to figure out what we want to have on the next agenda. I don't typically advance items on the agenda or authorize them if they don't make sense, unless I come back to you all or whoever it is wanting something placed on the agenda, at least gets a majority of you all to say, staff, put this on the agenda. So we don't really have what I would call a runaway train situation where numerous things are going to end up accidentally on the agenda. I won't allow it unless you all tell me to, and then we'll make sure it's on there, so as a group.
Well, I also think it could be of benefit to just gain a little bit of camaraderie, get to know each other better, what we want to accomplish this year. But it's up to the council. If there's an appetite for doing that, fine. If not, then
Didn't we do that last year?
we did it the last year or the year before, yes.
I think it was very helpful. It's something we can discuss together, and so we understand each other what we want to see done. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's a good idea.
I thought that's what we discussed at the last, the last city council meeting,
Yeah, I think.
where
you
we
did-
all need to get together and find out where we have consensus and what are short-term goals for the year that can be achieved by what we do have consensus on. I
Does-
thought that's what was discussed at the last meeting.
I think we need consensus in order to get a date on it. Is there?
Let's make a
Yes,
date.
let's make
do
it
it.
happen.
Okay.
Let's make a
Great.
date. So.
And I
know
took that to mean we wanted work sessions on maybe an infinite number of
1 year
items.
short-term goals.
And I thought
that-
we would start on Woody C, since that's one that's super critical to us and probably the most deserving of your time as a body and of staff's time, of course.
Yes, we also would like one for us to be able to sit down and share with our fellow members things that we feel could happen in the short term and find out where we have consensus on some of these. And then once we know we have consensus, we can then direct staff to put those on future agenda items, which is kind of what the goal was, I thought, that we had in progress on the last meeting.
It would allow.
I'm at your, whatever the group decides, we'll set her up.
We
Yeah.
want to set a meeting to gain consensus on short-term goals of the current city council members. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
If you could send out a few dates that work within your schedule, that'd be
Okay,
great.
we'll do it. Now, is this a meeting where you anticipate director level attendance, or is this, you just want a
Open.
manager?
I
I-
don't think that's
yeah.
necessary, just.
I
open
think it's
meeting.
basically the five of us discussing, are we all on the same page on goal 1, 2, and 3? Then there's an outlier goal, and then getting some feedback on the actual resources we have at staff level to actually attack certain ones so we can figure out the low-hanging fruit,
Okay,
low-risk, high-reward goals for this group for the next
sure,
year.
I get that for sure. Okay. Okay, guys, thank you.
And that is all I have, so over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week, I attended a meeting with the mayor and county chairperson and the county administrator, where we discussed best practices of the jail and some of our needs as it relates to inmate housing and some of those challenges that we have right now in front of us. In short, we have an opportunity to potentially save $350,000 a year by having a competitive process for jail services. It would be very similar to what South Hutch does right now with the county. It'd be the same fee base that they pay the county. We have asked the county to explore that option for us to see if there'd be an appetite to allow us to have the same favorable rate that other people pay, and we're still waiting for a response. In the meantime, We are continuing to do our own transport. That seems to be working very well. We're finding some other efficiencies with those resources that we didn't have before. And that does allow us, it gives us a capacity to transport. The reality is, in this day and age, you're not transporting near as much as you might have been 5 years ago, because so much of this is done with video arraignments, video consultations with the court and legal representatives. So, to a certain sense, it almost doesn't matter where you house them, provided it complies with the statutes and it's affordable. We'll keep you posted on that matter. Also, thank you, Mayor. Woody's seat, 6:30 Thursday night. I anticipate that being at least several hours. We did a drive run yesterday with staff on the presentation, and it's going to be a lot of information to take in, but it's, I think it'll probably allow you to walk away with a decision that evening. I get that feeling after going through the dry run. I think you'll have a pretty good understanding and probably an opinion on it. Also, I want to thank Dave Sotelo for the MLK events and his efforts to develop those and broaden the city's participation in that. And with that, I'll risk for questions. Thank you.
I do got a question on that 6:30 meeting. I seen in your notes that you're not allowing public, they can come but not to speak. Is that true?
It's going to be largely up to the governing body, but a work session is typically one where the public is allowed to attend and observe, of course, but the governing body, at its discretion, has the ability to typically make it for attendance only and not public input at that time. You guys can change those rules.
So what do you think about that, Mayor?
Well, traditionally, city council meetings have been the avenue for public comment. If we want to make study sessions open to public comment, we should probably reserve that for the end of the meeting after the presentation by staff and council discussion.
Well, the only problem we have with that, you might have a lot of citizens want to talk about it. Give their
Oh,
opinion,
yeah,
you know?
and I think they should come and talk to us, yeah.
All right. So
I
we'll
think
have
it
enough.
would take a long time. Is there any way we could have 2 meetings?
Well, what we could do is limit comments to 3 to 5 minutes like we've done in the past. We can ask that, that people speak on behalf of the neighborhood, that they assign, spokesperson. There's a lot of different ways we can design meeting rules.
I think that there needs to be a longer time frame for the citizens to speak, so I do encourage that we actually have a separate meeting just for public input on this.
Well,
from
my
that
concern
community.
is if they're not at the meeting where we talk about it, they may not have the information necessary to ask the
Mhm.
questions. Like, we don't know
Can we do
what
both?
parts of the project they're
Yeah.
not, enjoying, or we can let them have public comment. We just need to be prepared to stay till, 9:30 or 10 if needed.
Okay.
And I would suggest that, my idea, I would suggest that we have a sign-in sheet. So a lot of people say Dev's never notified. I don't know. To me, you need to have, if they want to, sign in.
Yeah, good idea.
And that way we have proof that we had a meeting and we had 20 people attend the meeting. So that way we can not protect ourselves, but say we did do what we did.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We'll just have a sign-in sheet for those who wish to make comments. I just want to make sure that all of the facts are laid out by the staff before rumors are addressed, because that can eat up a lot of time.
Yes.
Mayor, if the group decides to do that, why don't I pitch this? We just hold it in this room. You guys are gonna have much more comfortable chairs. You're gonna be here all night. And it's gonna allow individuals speaking at the podium to be recorded, and we have a better system already set up for
Yeah,
that.
Sounds
fine.
good.
That sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
And I do think we also need to have a follow-up meeting too with the community before we make any decisions. Just one meeting where you guys, staff gives us presentation, we talk about it, we have some public comments. I think because this is such a big issue, I do think we need to have several.
Well, and we should have them in the
Discussion.
neighborhood.
Yeah, we need to
So
have
that
a
they can
neighborhood
attend.
meeting
Yeah.
where maybe the city manager and one council member goes or something. I definitely think this needs to be where there's a lot of participation from both people in that neighborhood and outside that neighborhood as well. I think there needs to be a public. I really think we need to get the people involved in this because it is such a big impact, especially to that neighborhood.
Why don't we gauge the audience and the participation after the meeting on Thursday, and then make a call an audible on what we need to do moving forward for another meeting?
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Because if everyone in the audience, if there's an idea and everyone says, yeah, that's great, then there's no point in having another meeting.
Well, there is some concern that people in the neighborhood may not be able to attend at that time, so having it at the school, having one at the school might be helpful too.
What I started to say was there's a meeting Monday night with the Southwest Bricktown group that I'll be at, and
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
sure
good.
I'll hear.
Good.
And we've talked about it at every one we've been to. So, I mean, I think there's good communication
Okay.
right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, not everybody's gonna be happy, but I think there's some, you know, the leaders down there would make a concession and they understand the tax implications, and if we have something to go back and say, here's what we're looking at, I think it makes sense. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, we're not gonna make a decision Thursday night, I don't think. I mean, I don't wanna drag the wheels of government.
No, thank you, council.
Okay.
Fortunately, we're not in the position of having to have the decision immediately, but we are probably in the context of needing to have a formal decision to allow it to go to design. We were talking about that yesterday. You know, if we're off on this portion of it, it can push the project into a whole complete different year, depending on where this discussion falls in that window.
I hope you understand, I don't wanna drag it out, but,
Yeah, understood.
okay.
I believe we're going to have a lot of robust dialogue. That's probably the easiest way to say it. And so far, in the multiple meetings that I've attended with the neighborhood, there's some good ideas. But I don't think I've seen one person yet come forward and say, yes, we want a project in our neighborhood. And I understand that. So hopefully we can understand that when we're meeting with the group, and something's gonna have to be done at some point in time, and we can at least plug in some of the features of neighborhood, you know, quality assets of life, such as the green space, the park, the trailhead, stuff like that that can be brought into this. But also staff is going to be able to show you some of the safety features, I think, that will probably make a lot of sense. And it's probably gonna give us more context than just property owner input versus a project that's unwanted by the time that you see some of these other elements of the review. Not an easy one.
Okay, any other items?
Thank you, Mayor. All rest.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Garza,
Yes.
Bass,
Yes.
Bagwell,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Harris, Dick,
Yes.